now she's being like Bella again. She's doing the Bella move. I'm such a reader. I read everything. Oh, I always have a book with me. I'm just such a reader. I read. I'm such a reader. You know what? Real readers, real avid readers who love books and love literature and that stuff, they don't constantly talk about how they're readers. Because you know what they do? They show rather than tell. You tell and don't show even in real life, you moron! There she goes, talking about, OMG, I'm so crazy. I hate that. Alright, moving on to the next section of this thing. On the writing process. And see, you know, this is another thing where I could almost relate to her. Rereading your work over and over and over again, and editing it, and finding new errors to correct, and new wordings to change, and all that kind of stuff. On one hand, I can relate to that. Mrs. Hyde and I do that a lot. I mean, a lot. And we always find something new, and even after we post it online to be seen, we're often editing it. Mrs. Hyde always finds stuff and changes it. That's the way we are. Except when I see the final product, it makes me wonder, just what were you changing? You weren't changing what's important. You weren't taking out the right commas. You weren't changing dashes to semicolons. You weren't fixing your fragments. You weren't fixing your run-ons. What were you doing to change all of it? See, you just pointed out why Hyde and I edit the way we do. See, I can't ignore my mistakes as much when I hear on audio. I have tried to listen to my books on audio, and I cannot do it because I hear the awkwardness in a phrase when it's spoken aloud and just think, oh, I shouldn't have phrased it that way. It's why we read our stories aloud, as a way of betaing them. And you know, it's funny. You actually admit that characters don't talk that way, and yet you never improve it. In fact, you make it worse. Your writing declines as it goes. If you know it's awkward, why do you keep doing it over and over again? This is not an acknowledgement. This is not an acknowledgement of your mistakes, Meyer. This is you talking about how you make these mistakes and you don't like it anymore, so people will tell you you're wrong. When you realize you're having an awkward phrase when it's spoken aloud and you realize people don't talk like that or it sounds weird, you're supposed to go, oh my gosh, I will change that immediately. I'll stop doing that. No, you don't. You just want people to disagree with you. You're fishing. Talking about her big sister Emily. My sister's so everything's wonderful. Everything's perfect. You shouldn't change a single word. That right there is the inherent flaw in who you showed it to. If I had done the same thing you did, and I showed that to Mrs. Hyde, I think she would have taken one look at me and said, were you high? Because you see, my sister can tell what's quality and what isn't. Your sister, Emily, obviously can't tell what a misplaced comma is. That was one of my favorite parts of editing, reading the story. From any other person. This is what bugs me. I like rereading my stories I write. I really do. There are some of the stuff that excuse me. Some of the stuff I've written that I love rereading, and I do it all the time. I sometimes read some of my stuff aloud. I catch errors that way, but I change it because, it's not like it's published or anything. Bound copy. I like rereading my stories because sometimes I genuinely think I've done a good job. I can relate to that. But this is coming from Meyer, who's an arrogant twit. So it just sounds like I love rereading my own work because I'm just that awesome. That's all it sounds like to me. And it makes me feel horrible because, I'm guilty of doing the same thing. I like rereading my work. So it just looks like a horrible double standard, and I'm moving on. She's apparently never even taken a creative writing class. That's impressive. Millions of people have now read what you wrote. Is it still terrifying to you every time you put a book out? Yeah, and with good reason. Because the world has changed and the way books are received is very different now. People are very vocal, and I do not have a lot of calluses on my creative soul. Every blow feels like the first one. I have not learned how to take that lightly or let it roll off of me. I know it's something I need to learn before I go mad, but it's not something I have perfected, and it's so hard. Even when you know it's coming, you don't know where it's coming from. A lot of them are sucker punches. With every book, I always see the part that I think people are going to get mad about or the part that's going to get mocked. So why did you put it out? Also, well, I'm sure if you're really good, a few angels could be spared to weep upon your poor soul. You know, they'll weep tears of blood if it's a good day. You emo brat. You don't need to toughen up. You need to grow a spine. What kind of paragraph is that? Are you trying to make me feel bad for tearing apart your book? Because I don't. That just makes me feel better about it, you little weakling. Grow a spine. Just get a backbone. Get one. There are going to be people who really dislike things that are very personal to me, and I'm just going to have to take it. Well, maybe if you didn't insert yourself into your book, you wouldn't take it so personally. To me, you create a character and you define them and you make them who they are, and you get them into a shape where they are final. Their story isn't, but they are who they are, and they do feel very real. You can't change who they are to make the story go easier. So sometimes things happen in the story because my character, being who he is, can't do anything different. That is not good. One, you can change the character to whatever you want because it's your character. You really can. You can say, you know what? I don't like that part of his personality, so I'm going to take it out. You can do that. I know it's a novel concept, but you can. You really can. He's not a real person. You can change whatever you want about this character. Also, why do you pigeonhole yourself like that? Why did you even say that? Say, I can't do stuff because the character absolutely must do this because that's what he would do. Well, I already pointed out in New Moon. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Edward leaving. Your characters act OOC all the time. Rosalie is the worst. Rosalie is out of character every time I see her. She's like 10 different people. I've counted. She's like 2 versions in Twilight. Counting the asides, she's 3, I think, versions in New Moon. She's 3 versions in Breaking Dawn, and 1 version in Eclipse. Yeah, I think I counted 10 different Rosalies you have in your story. You can't get your characters down at all. What do you get the right to talk about how you cannot make your characters act OOC? Your characters do it all the time. And half the time I don't even know why they do stuff they do. Oh, that's making me feel uncomfortable. I'm talking about the characters coming to life. Immediately asked about Jacob. How is Bella ever going to find out he's a vampire? Because there's no way Edward would just tell her. But at least you had the sense there. Except, he kind of does just tell her. I had picked Forks already as story's location, so I thought, these people have been around for a while and they've been in this area before. Obviously because they're stupid. When you're an immortal vampire, you don't go to the same area twice when there are probably still people alive who remember you. So do you admit that your characters are stupid? Okay, have they left tracks or footprints? You just needed to say tracks. That somewhere that she can discover an older story to give her insight. You pad even in your interviews. That's when I discovered there was a little reservation of Kuyut Indians on the coastline. I was interested in them before I even knew I was going to work them into the story. I thought that's interesting. It's real dense and different kind of history there. I've always been fascinated with Native American history, and this was a story I'd never heard before. That makes me really uncomfortable. Because she discovers there's a Native American tribe on the coast and realizes, oh, superstitious brown people, they can tell her about the vampires. That makes me really uncomfortable, so I'm not going to comment on it anymore. Yeah, the story about Jacob, I've already yelled about that in my recaps. I hate that Jacob was nothing but an afterthought. He made very little difference to this story. He existed as a plot device, and he still exists as a plot device. She always talks about, oh, once I got to know Jacob, I went back and rewrote Twilight a bit to include him more in the story. No, you didn't. He comes in out of nowhere, says, hey, the Cullens are vampires, vanishes until chapter 12, comes in to ask, so are you dating Edward? She confirms yes, then he vanishes again, and then he shows up again to do nothing, and then at the very end he shows up to say, by the way, there are werewolves in the next book. It's not a character. That's not writing in a guide to be more prominent in your book. He's a plot device. That's why I called him Plot Device in my recap. I didn't call him by name because he didn't deserve one. Jacob's character also became an answer to the deficiencies in Edward, because Edward's not perfect. Well, that's a contradiction to everything else you say about how he is perfect. There were things about him that didn't make him the most perfect boyfriend in the whole world. Like the abuse. I mean, some things about him make him an amazing boyfriend. Like what? No, you can't say money. But other things were lacking, like his penis. And Jacob was sort of the alternative. Here you have Edward, who overthinks, someone who overthinks everything, whose every emotion is overwrought and just tortures himself. He's a little emo idiot, in other words. Also, when you say overthinks, I think you misunderstood. Overthink does not mean takes twice as long to say anything. The first 12 chapters of Midnight Sun are twice as long as the first 12 chapters of Twilight. That doesn't mean he's overthinking things, Meyer. That just means you won't shut up! This is Jacob. Here's someone who's able to take things in stride a little bit more, who doesn't overthink everything. Someone who's a little rash. He does seem foolish sometimes because he doesn't pause to think before he leaps, you know? Well, like assaulting Bella. He just wasn't thinking. He just looked before he left and thought, I'll just, date rape her right here. No, Jacob's not the opposite of Edward at all. They're exactly alike. They're both horrible people, and I want to kill them. But, the main point she was saying, for why she wanted a supposedly opposite number Jacob, who only was vaguely an opposite when he wasn't a romantic interest. Once he became a romantic interest, Meyer immediately turned him into a more jerk version of Edward, which is hard to do. Anyway, point is, that was sort of the opposite of Edward's character in a lot of ways. It gave balance to the story and a choice for Bella because I think she needed that. There was an option for her to choose a different life with someone she could have loved or someone who she does love. I always felt that was really necessary to the story because when I write, I try to make the characters react to things the way I think real people would. So, again, Jacob's just a plot device. That's it. He existed for her to be able to say, no, I definitely want Edward. He's nothing but a plot device. He was nothing but something to be used. Always. And, of course, all that flies out the window in Breaking Dawn. Because the minute Jacob imprints on the death baby, the minute the death baby is torn out of Bella's mommy sack, and the minute he imprints on the baby, the second Bella sees him again, she says she doesn't love him anymore. So there was never any choice she made. It was always destiny. So it doesn't make any sense, and also the main point here is that he's nothing but a plot device. He's not a real character, and also make the characters react to things I think real people would react to them. No, most people tend to have a little empathy. Most people tend to react to genuine emotions. Most people tend to feel sorry for people. Most people tend to act like human beings. They don't act like little sociopaths like your stupid character. And also, here, the next line here. I think that in reality, it's never one boy. There's never this moment when you know. You just said you try to have the characters react to things the way you think real people would, and then you say, it's never like how you wrote it. Again, I use the quote. It's not like she's thinking about what she's writing. They're talking about alternate realities. What happens when your characters make a choice and a certain storyline happens, the choices they make the storyline happen. They're talking about AUs. The question was, the Shannon Hale said, I think that's where, I think that comes into the writing, that you're aware of these alternate realities. I think the reader becomes aware of these other realities too, and that's nice because then it's not predictable. You don't know exactly what's going to happen because you can see there are other ways it can go. Meyer's answer, I think that's why alternate stories develop, because you have to make it suspenseful. There has to be conflict, and, pardon me while I laugh, and there has to be hopefully some mystery about where it's going to go. If it's so clear that something specific is obviously going to happen, well, nobody wants to read that, so where's the suspense going to come from? It all comes from when you start to realize, well, this other thing could have happened, even though you know where you're going with it. This is where your dead herrings hurt your writing. I think I've, in all the books you've done, I think I've been surprised once. It wasn't necessarily a good surprise. I think it was in Bree Tanner. One thing surprised me. I didn't see it coming. One thing surprised me. And like I said, just because it was surprised doesn't mean it was good. Because most of the time, you load your writing with, it couldn't possibly be this. It's not going to be this. It's not going to be... Well, what do you know it is? That's your dead herring problem, Meyer. You need to fix it. Your stories are not suspenseful because you tell me straight out what's going to happen. You hold my hand through your novels. And you also misunderstand the point of an AU, because, yeah, the point of an AU is not just, it could have gone that way. That's not creating the suspense. What creates the suspense is not knowing how it's going to go. Not thinking, oh, it could have gone that way. I'm talking about Bella here. Meyer says, I was never really sure where I wanted to be in 10 years, but Bella knows. Yeah, she wants to be an undead abomination. But she doesn't look at it that way. She wants to be a sparkly, rich, immortal Meyerpire with power to kill whoever gets in her way and whoever's annoying. So that's what they said, if they had Shannon Hale asked Meyer if you knew exactly what was going to happen after you had that dream, and would you still write it down? She says, I don't know if I would be able to. Whine, whine, whine. Oh, this life is so stressful. Yes, enjoy your pillow of money, Meyer. So, but the thing is, they ask, would Bella do the same thing? And she says, oh no, absolutely not. Bella would do the exact same thing even if she knew everything that would happen afterwards. Well, yeah, that's because nothing bad happens. She gets what she wants. She gets immortality. She gets the ultimate, she gets everything she wants. Why would she change anything? Not to mention that, that also speaks very highly of her character, considering that she would change nothing, considering how horrible she was, considering all the mistakes she makes, considering everything you say she would change, absolutely nothing? Really? That's not admirable. But, this just looks like Meyer's trying to emphasize, see, Bella's not me, see? She wouldn't change anything, but I would, so it's fine, that's the way it works. It just sounds like she's trying to distance herself from the character because people have accused her, of being a self-insert. So she's trying to say, no, she does the opposite things I do. No, Meyer. A self-insert does not have to be exactly you. You're admitting right here, I never had that kind of absolute certainty and focus in regular everyday things when I was a teenager, but you obviously make it clear you want that. A self-insert isn't just you. A self-insert is everything you want to be and everything you want. She's still you. Alright, I finished that section. That was on characters coming to life. I mean, your characters are about as living as a piece of lint. Alright, moving on the rewards of writing. This is going to be fun. Yeah, this segment really didn't say anything. I've just finished it. It didn't really say much. There's nothing really of import to comment on, so I'm moving on. On endings and inevitability. Next segment. Okay, here is the main problem with Meyer's rigidity she's got. She said, endings to me are always inevitable. You get to a point where there's no other way it can go. If I tried to do something different, I think it would feel really unnatural, but I'd rarely try. It's like, let's just let this be what it is. This is the way the story goes. Okay, I can understand having a definite ending. Like, you want to have a story, you have a beginning, you have an ending, you want to know where the story's going, so you decide the story's going to go here. And you start adding details. Well, I hate to break it to you, Meyer, but endings can change. And very often when you're writing a new story, they should. You should never say, this is how it's going to end, because guess what? When you say that's how it's going to end, you have to do exactly what you said you can't do because you're apparently just that awesome. You have to force your characters to do things that they wouldn't normally do. If that ending isn't natural for everything you wound up putting in the story, the ending has to change. There's no other choice. Sometimes you add a scene in a story and say, that does not jive with the ending I wrote. You have to change it. The ending is... I like to think, you can write with an ending in mind, and I'm sure a lot of people do. They write things based on the end. Like, Hyde and I did that. We wrote a story, we wrote the frame story first, a prologue and an epilogue, and we said, okay, how can we get to the epilogue? And we worked around that. It can be done, but the way you're talking is just, this is how the story goes, and I'm not going to change it, ever. If something had happened in the story we wrote that didn't work with the epilogue, we would have changed the epilogue. Because that's the easiest thing to change. The end is the easiest thing to change because it's just the end. Everything else takes up the bulk of the novel. So, like I said, this is not a very good way of writing for you because you sit there and yank and force and twist the rest of your story into it because you refuse to change the ending. And I'm guessing your ending was, I want everything to be sparkles and rainbows and beautiful things and nobody dies and nobody's unhappy and everyone's paired off. Now I have to make the rest of the story fit to it when you shouldn't have. Because there was a ton of stuff in there that doesn't fit with it.
Prometed it all.